terms of what ripple effect this could cause for me, JT, is that it puts the Titans in a real bind during the part of the season that is both arguably the hardest on their schedule. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and you can follow me on Twitter at Easton Freeze. I'm joined, as always, by producer JT, who you can follow on Twitter at JT_Runke. JT, how we doing?
How we doing? What's up? We're recording this on Thursday live, but if we're doing the recording tomorrow, happy Friday. The weekend is almost here, and I thought this show was going to be just another random June show, you know.
We had a completely different plan for today's show, and then
we were gonna turn this into the Hot Read Film Society show, where we just talk about all the movies we've been watching recently. But for better or for worse, and it is for worse.
For worse.
We have something to talk about today.
We have plenty to talk about today. Yeah, so we appreciate everybody that is tuning in with us live. If you are watching live, do us a favor, hit retweet, hit like, hit share, whatever you can do, text the link to a friend. We want to get as many folks in here live as we can. So I would consider it a personal favor if you could do that very simple, very easy thing for me real quick. Just share this however you can. And if you want to join the conversation, go on over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. So if you're watching this on Twitter or on Facebook, thank you for tuning in. If you want to participate and comment so that we can see your comments, go to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. Find this live stream, and in the comment section of this stream, that is where you'll be able to send us comments that we'll be able to see on our end. JT, as you mentioned, we've been watching a lot of movies lately. My wife has been out of town most of the last 2 weeks with work stuff. I'm very excited for her to come back at this point because I'm just twiddling my thumbs, not sure what to do around the house here. And because of that, you and I we've been digging into a lot of movies lately. I mean, this month at large, but in particular the last 2 weeks. We went to the theater to see The Flash, which was better than both of us expected. I saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse earlier this month. It was phenomenal. You still need to see that one. We may go see that one together. I'd watch that again. Last night we went to the theater and saw Asteroid City, the new Wes Anderson movie, which we liked a lot. Very, very Wes Anderson. If you're a fan of Wes Anderson films, it is very on brand for him, and we enjoyed that. Tonight, we're going to watch a couple movies just here at the house. It's the reason why we were delayed today in getting the stream up. This weather, not great. I suppose it's better than the alternative because today was supposed to be like 107 degrees. It was supposed to be brutally hot and humid, and now it's just humid and overcast. So, I guess we can take that, but it's kind of an ugly day here in Nashville weather-wise. So we're going to watch a little Pulp Fiction tonight, which is one of those movies that I unfortunately have never seen, and it's definitely a movie I should have seen by now. And you're like, oh, we're watching that. So we're going to watch that and have a good time. Before we get into football, Preds draft the NHL draft was last night, of which the Preds were involved. It was the farewell David Poile show all night long. I had no idea how much of a legend David Poile was in the NHL community. Like everyone talked about him like he was the entire league's grandfather. There was a lot of thank yous. Every single team basically got up, and one of the executives was like, thanks to David Poile for being my mentor or for helping me with advice and getting into the job that I'm into. And it's like, oh, what a legend, man.
Yeah. I mean, I totally, like, I sent you that text like right before you said that he was like the grandpa of the league. Like, David Poile's been around before the asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs in the NHL. Like, he's a living legend, and congrats to him on a great career. And there's no better parting gift than that guitar that Pekka and Roman Josi gave him yesterday. I can't wait to see him on tour as he just shreds it. I think there's no other reason to give it to him, right?
Right. I'm sure he's a very talented guitarist.
When he's not being the grandfather of the NHL, he's shredding in the background.
I will say there were a number of things that made it enjoyable. Also, I'm a total curmudgeon when it comes to the NHL draft or any draft that isn't the NFL draft. I think they're all stupid and bad. I tweeted this earlier today, like fans of other sports, other major leagues, hockey fans, baseball fans, basketball fans, soccer fans. It's like, why does the NFL have this death grip on the attention of the American public? Why can't other leagues compete with the NFL's popularity? And it's like, allow me to just point to the NHL, who hosted the second round of their draft today on a Thursday at 10 in the morning. We're going to televise that at 10 a.m. on a Thursday because that makes a lot of sense. Like, take it up with your harebrained, galaxy-brained leagues, man. I don't know what all they do is the NFL is the only league that consistently, for the most part, does not over and over and over get in their own way. These other leagues make decisions constantly that just blow my mind and make no sense. And so, like, if you love the NHL draft, I'm not trying to yuck your yum, but for me, it's weird, man. The whole thing, there's like a million things about it that are weird. You've got nobody knows these prospects. They're of all different ages and availabilities. You've got maybe one or two guys, maybe, that are even going to play as rookies. The rest are going to go back to college. You know, I think the Preds' first pick, they asked him, like, you know, what's your plans next year? And he's going to play college hockey next year. Like, he's going back to school, and he's got drafted. And that's, I guess, part of the fact that they don't have a minimum age requirement or like an eligibility requirement like you do in the NFL, where you have to have played 2 years of college ball or be of a certain age to be eligible for the NFL draft. They don't have that in the NHL. So you can get drafted like 16 years old and not even be in college yet, right? It's just strange. It's weird.
It is, and it's like a lot like baseball. Like, you can be drafted straight out of high school. But like you said, there's not. I mean, in the NBA, you have probably more than half of the players are going to come into the league and make an immediate impact on their team.
Yep.
In the NFL, all those guys are looking to make an impact immediately. But like with hockey and baseball, most of those guys are not going to see the rink or the field for 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years.
I mean, the 6th overall pick last night, the phenom from Russia, he's not even. First of all, the teams weren't even able to scout him because there's a war going on over there, and so like they were kind of just having to guess. Is what I've been told, is like there wasn't a whole lot of tape on him. They didn't really get to speak to him much. And now he's been drafted to Anaheim, the Ducks?
The Flyers.
The Flyers.
Which is such a Flyers pick.
Team. Yeah, the Flyers draft him, and he's under contract in the KHL. Is that the Russian league until 2025? He's got 3 more or maybe 2026. He's got 3 more seasons in the KHL before he can come play in the NHL. What are we doing? How do you get excited about that as a fan? Like, yes, it's like we get to see this guy in a presidential term from now. That, huh? How is that exciting?
I mean, if you're a Flyers fan, you're not really excited about anything. Okay. So like that's probably why there's a couple teams like that made the most sense for him to actually like go to. Just to wrap this up. I mean, there's a couple teams like that have no future for the next.
But say it has to be a massive rebuild, right?
You just have to like sit on him, and for the Flyers, that's what they're doing. So
okay, well, enough of me yelling at the clouds about the NHL. I'm sorry if anybody loves the NHL draft. Again, I'm not trying to. I'm glad you had a good time. For me, not my thing. Let's talk about the news of the day. Unfortunate news of the day. Titans had a gambling suspension, which is becoming a little endemic in the league. We're seeing more and more of it over the last 2 seasons, really in line with the NFL getting in bed as a organization, as a company, with all of these sports books and the betting industry at large. We're now seeing, I think this is the 10th suspension of some kind that is betting related that has come down, and the Titans are now going to be spending the first third of their season this year, the first 6 games of the year, without their starting right tackle, second-year player Nicholas Petit-Frere. The Titans put out a statement today, sent the media a statement that reads as follows: "We have been made aware of Nick's suspension by the league. We believe in Nick and know that he has deep respect for the integrity of the game and our organization. We will continue to emphasize to our players the importance of understanding and adhering to league rules and policies." For Nicholas Petit-Frere's part, he issued a statement, was the first statement that I saw of any kind. I think it came out with the announcement, which is not shocking considering this actual infraction probably happened a while ago. People in the know, including Petit-Frere, were probably aware of this being an inevitability. And so he put out a statement with ESPN this morning that reads as follows. Firstly, I wanted to say that it's an honor to play in the NFL, and it's been a blessing to play this game. The NFL plans to announce another round of sanctions regarding its gambling policies, and I will be included in this group of players receiving a 6-game suspension. The betting I engaged in was not NFL related and was legal under Tennessee law. It is only being sanctioned because it occurred at the Titans facility. I want to apologize to my family, coaches, teammates, and Titans fans. I have always strived in every stage of my life to follow the rules. I did not knowingly break the rules. Even after attending a league presentation, I was unaware about the specifics around placing bets from a team facility. I will do everything in my power to help the team during training camp and will be prepared when I return to the roster during the season. Before I editorialize and give my opinion on all of this, I also wanted to include some quotes from an article written by a friend of the show, our buddy Nick Suss over the Tennessean. He wrote a seemingly very prescient article earlier this month about Nicholas Petit-Frere and the NFL's gambling policy. I was actually standing there on the field with Nick and Nicholas Petit-Frere for part of this conversation earlier in June during the end of OTAs. Nick was asking Nicholas about the gambling policy and his thoughts on it. And at that time, I think we had just heard of the Colts players that were going to be suspended with a much more serious infraction, betting on the NFL, betting on the Colts themselves, which we'll talk about more in detail later. But here are some quotes from Nicholas Petit-Frere and from that article by Nick Suss. Quote, and this is from Petit-Frere himself. I'll be honest with you. There wasn't really a lot of teaching from the NFL and things like that, Petit-Frere told the Tennessean. I was actually one of the people who asked the most questions when it came to fantasy football and things like that. I just wanted to make sure I learned as much as I could. When we heard about those suspensions and things like that, I'll be honest, a lot of the guys felt like there just wasn't a lot of teaching in general about this offense. I just feel like there's something the NFL should kind of harbor a little bit more. Excuse me. I feel like that's something the NFL should kind of harbor a little bit more and understand these guys are making mistakes and that they didn't even know that it was a thing. It's tough. None of us ever want to do anything that jeopardizes the shield, that jeopardizes the NFL. Petit-Frere said, our mission every single day, and we're blessed to do this, is to play this children's game. We're getting paid to do it. Not only that, we get a lot of great experiences from not only the team that we build, but the players we're a part of, and also the fans. I would say I feel like the outlook of it is that it's something we should be that should be more visited by the NFL and looked into more as a teaching moment than really a moment of coming down hard. Because in all honesty, if you ask guys, they weren't taught this. And so just to recap, this is the updated list of players that have had gambling suspensions handed down to them in the last 2 years. Players that got at least 1 year, and these were all for betting on the NFL itself. You obviously started with wide receiver Calvin Ridley, formerly of the Falcons, cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, linebacker Rashad Berry, defensive tackle Demetrius Taylor, safety CJ Moore, wide receiver Quintez Cephas, and defensive end Shaka Toney. And then 3 players have had 6-game suspensions for non-NFL bets, but bets placed while at work. Offensive tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere, wide receiver Jameson Williams, and wide receiver Stanley Berryhill. So a couple of things, JT, a number of things. First of all, this is a question I've gotten a handful of times before even today. But today in particular, I've had a couple of folks ask me, and it's understandable if you're not in the betting space at all, if you don't engage in sports betting, then I think it's understandable to not quite understand this. People asking me, how does the league even know when and where these guys bet? So when you sign up for any of these sports books, DraftKings, BetMGM, Superbook, what's the number one? FanDuel. Yeah, FanDuel I couldn't think of. You are in the terms and service that you're definitely not reading, agreeing to geolocation being turned on your phone whenever you are using that app for anything. And that's legally necessary because by law in almost every state that I'm aware of that has legalized sports gambling, you have to have geolocation turned on so that you aren't allowed by the app, by the sports book, to illegally place bets in states that you cannot legally bet in. So, for example, I have to have geolocation turned on to my phone when I bet in the NFL season, because if I go to my wife's family's house up in Kentucky, I can't legally sports bet. So I can go into the app and try to place bets. It won't allow me to. And you can't use VPNs or anything like that. It blocks all of that. It's very, as far as I'm aware, it's not easy at all to get around the geolocation element of sports betting. And again, it's not like these books want to do that. I don't think. I think it is because they have to legally. They can't be legally liable for allowing you to place bets illegally somewhere, and then they get wrapped up in the legal circus, and it's a whole mess. So that's how they know. In the NFL, I'm assuming all of these major leagues that have these rules on the books have deals with each of these major legally sanctioned sports books to have their players, when they sign up, be flagged and monitored, tracked for when and where they're placing bets. And it's set up so that whenever a player places a bet at a team facility, or, and this is part of it that people don't understand or people aren't aware of, or at a team hotel, or to my understanding, on a team bus or a team plane or a team vehicle of any kind, while you are on quote unquote team property, team real estate, you are being tracked by these books. And if you are flagged as having placed a bet within that geolocation fence, they report it to the league, and that's how the league knows. So it's not like when you see a player get into a domestic abuse situation or a domestic assault situation, and there's a whole legal process that comes down. And so like Alvin Kamara, for example, punches a dude out in Vegas, beats the crap out of him. That was 2 Pro Bowls ago, I think, at least a year ago. And it's just now in the legal system coming to some kind of conclusion. And the NFL is just now considering handing down a suspension. So it's this whole long drawn out thing. And there's kind of that gray area of, guy punches his girlfriend, and it's like, okay, he's not been found actually guilty of anything. There's a legal process. When and where should the NFL step in? Should they be placed on the commissioner's exempt list until we get some kind of legal finality? It's not like that with this. This is cut and dry. You get caught red-handed, like they're watching you. So there's no legal process. The NFL can just hand it down day of, and that's what is happening with these guys. It's not there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a fact. You broke the rules. So let's start with this, JT. Who is to blame for the Titans now having to miss their starting right tackle for the first third of the season? 1A, the person obviously and primarily responsible for this is Nicholas Petit-Frere himself. You are responsible for you, right? Clearly he didn't knowingly break any of the rules, as he said, and he wasn't acting with poor intentions. I feel like, I've been on the Titans beat for 2 years now. And so there are some players that have been around forever, like Kevin Byard, who I don't feel like naturally, I don't have, I think, the connection or the relationship with him that somebody like Teresa Walker or Paul Kaharski might have, because they've been around since he came into the league and they've been able to follow his personal journey from start to finish, and they've gotten to know that person a little bit personally. With more veteran players like that, I'm kind of behind the 8 ball and catching up. With guys like Petit-Frere, he's one of the few guys in that building, and the number grows each year, obviously, that I have been with and on the beat and around speaking to for the entirety of their NFL career. And so Petit-Frere is one of those guys that I feel confident enough in my read of them as a person to say he's an intelligent guy, and he's not somebody that would knowingly break the rules or try to skirt the rules or try to get around the rules, or just not care, full Isaiah Wilson style. This is a guy that I think obviously did not mean to break the rules. That doesn't mean it's not his fault. It doesn't mean that he didn't make a really stupid mistake, because ultimately it is your responsibility to know the rules. It's that simple. And I'll get to this in a second. The rules aren't that complicated. I understand that there's an education issue at hand here, as he said in his quote with Nick Suss, I believe, or actually in the statement he gave to ESPN this morning. I went to an NFL seminar as a rookie. They have the league puts on these seminars where they teach these rules, make sure the rookies know the letter of the law. He said he asked more questions than anybody else. He tried to be very clear. It seems like he's somebody that is into like DFS and fantasy football and sports betting and these things. And so he did his best to find out the rules, and yet clearly he wasn't aware of this portion of the rule. He knew you couldn't bet on the NFL. He didn't know you couldn't bet on anything while at work on team property. That brings me to 1B on the list of who is responsible here. And 1B, to a lesser extent than Petit-Frere, because again, you're responsible for you. Ultimately, it is your fault. It's the NFLPA's fault as well. In a shocking turn of events, and JT, I know this is going to blow your mind, the NFLPA has once again failed their players. The league doesn't have an education issue on the gambling policy. You're going to hear that a lot surrounding all of these suspensions. The league has an education issue. Look at how many, I mean, some of these guys are just, they don't care, or they're trying to skirt the rules, or they think they're above the rules. But some of these guys clearly just didn't know and made an honest mistake. The league has an education issue. No, it does not. The league puts on these seminars for their players to come and ask questions and be presented and walked through the letter of the law. And the letter of the law is really simple. There are pretty much just 2 rules. Can't bet on the NFL ever. Obvious. You shouldn't even have to be told that. That seems very clear. You can't bet on your own sport. Number 2, that's number 1. Number 2, you cannot bet on anything while you're at a team facility or on a team bus or a team plane or in a team hotel. In other words, while you are at work, while you are on the clock, you may not bet on anything. Away from work, you may bet on anything but the NFL. Those are really simple rules. It's up to the players' union, who is tasked with representing players and looking out for their well-being. They are trying to be the representative of their players and be the advocate of their players. It's up to them to properly educate their folks. And they failed. Again, as they fail constantly over and over and over. Think about this, JT. The NFLPA, they'll put, and I think Zach Lyons made this point earlier on a football show on the 440 Podcast Network. The NFLPA puts out a statement for everything. Like a player, can have a cold, and the NFLPA is putting out a statement on their opinion of the situation, their grasp of the situation, and somehow inevitably blaming the NFL for the situation as those two are at odds. You've not seen it really. As far as I'm aware, I've not seen a single statement on any of these suspensions from the PA. They know that these players screwed up. There's no gray to this. It is black and white. They messed up. The NFLPA did not do a good enough job of educating all their guys. Now, I'll say this. Members of the NFLPA, there's something like 3,000 of them that are active players or free agents or, within the NFL ecosystem as players of some kind. We've only had 10 suspensions in 2 years. Now, I mean, that number has gone from 0 for years and years and years for the most part to now 10 in 2 years. But the NFL clearly has a problem here, and they are cracking down hard. And so that brings me to the third person or entity that is responsible for this. It's the NFL. The only fault of theirs, the only reason they're on this list is for having a rule this ridiculous on the books in the first place. Obviously, betting on your own league can't be allowed. Everyone understands that. I don't have to walk you through why that doesn't make any sense. But betting on something completely unrelated on team property, it's a very, very silly rule. There's an opinion here. Like, people are split on this. Some folks will say that you have to have a zero tolerance policy. You can't allow what may be a gateway drug to inevitably gambling on the NFL. And I tweeted this out earlier. Mark Coates at Mark_him responded, and I wanted to mention it because I thought it was a productive back and forth. He said that the league always protects the shield. Gambling in itself presents an issue. The league does not want an MLB Pete Rose issue or an NBA Tim Donaghy issue. I cannot blame them. This rule is no different than any other rule that an employer is allowed to implement, especially with a union. And my response was simply that logic held a lot more water to me, JT, before the league got in bed with the gambling industry writ large. Now they print money that goes into the owner's pockets, that goes into the league office's pockets, and trickles down into the players' pockets on these deeply involved numerous business deals and relationships with these sports books and with the gambling companies. This is an ugly bed that the NFL now has to lay in. They are, you cannot, I mean, you can, and they are, but you cannot, without there being some scrutiny, be an organization that says on Sunday every single week, hey, check out the official partner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Superbook Sports. Bet with them today, get 15% off your first 15% credit on your first deposit, blah, blah, blah. The NFL brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Also, we're going to come down incredibly hard on any of our players that use these companies to bet on something other than the NFL. That's ridiculous to me. It's silly to me. And I think it is something that they won't change. I don't expect them to change this rule. I expect them to continue to come hard and heavy and throw the books at these guys. But I really think it's a dumb rule. Do you disagree?
I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, I feel like the rule may be more implemented as, especially like on the side of you can't do it on like a team plane or a bus or hotel or anything. It may be more of just like it can be a distraction maybe that teams really don't want their players to deal with. I think that's could definitely be a side of it. But
my rebuttal to that is, you know what else is a distraction teams don't want their players dealing with? Domestic abuse, abusing substances, illegal substances. You know, I can rattle off 10 negative temptations in life that all of us as humans, as adults, have to go through life managing ourselves. Like, you're an adult, you know what I mean? Like, it's up to you to avoid temptation, to avoid excess, to take care of yourself as an adult. These guys are adults. Why should the NFL have to baby proof their facilities, baby proof the experience for their players because they're afraid that it may be a slippery slope? That's foolish to me. I don't understand.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, the rule can be just stupid and just kind of confusing, but it's just kind of what the NFL wants to do. It's how they want to do it. And it's just kind of, it's accepting the fact, whether we think it's dumb or not. It's, like you said, obviously up to the players to respect these rules. And like you said, it's not, really isn't that hard to really follow these rules.
There's
right?
There's pretty much two. You're right. There's no excuse for it.
I feel like we're seeing a lot of these, like 10 in 2 years is a lot. I would option on the side of that it goes down the next couple of years, because we see that we see a lot of people, their response to this being, oh, well, I just didn't know. Right. So now you know. And we're seeing.
Well, I think players are just going to be scared of it. They're going to be scared of the unknown and just be like, you know what, I'm not messing with it. It's too.
You would think so, but then there's always players that continue.
No, I mean not all of them, but I think a large majority. I think a large subsection of the player base is already that way. I would guarantee if you could poll all 3,000 players that are a member of the NFLPA, do you bet or do you not, and why? That a large portion, if not a majority of those that say they don't bet at all, they're not involved in gambling at all, would say, I would actually probably consider it if this wasn't my line of work. And if I didn't know and see firsthand now 10 different times that there's a lot of ways that you can easily and apparently accidentally get yourself in trouble. And so I'm just not going to mess with it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like the two that came out today with NPF and then the Colts players that we'll talk about a little bit later. Like NPF has come out and like very publicly said, like, I was confused on the rules and this happens. And you got to be better and you go from here.
It's two very different situations. Both dumb, but not the same.
We have Isaiah Rodgers coming out saying that he put $1,000 bet on the over under of like a backup running back. And it's being presumed now that
Colts, on his team,
it's being presumed now that Isaiah Rodgers really did that because he knew that Jonathan Taylor was most likely going to be out for a game.
That's what I was
going to
say.
On a rookie running back.
We don't know, and this is all hearsay and rumors, but it is being said that he put a large 4-figure bet on, and this is the part that you're like your eyebrow raiser, on a Colts running back. That if Jonathan Taylor missed a lot of the year last year, if you're betting the over on a guy that it's a Tuesday and Jonathan Taylor's questionable, but internally that, JT's not going to go this week. It's going to be all the backup. Let me take the over on his yards when Vegas and the public doesn't know. That's what we call insider trading, kids. That's the thing that the NFL really is trying to avoid. That's corruption. That's ruining the product, or that's rigging the game. And that's not fair. So that is, again, not to say what NPF or any of these other guys that bet did. Jameson Williams with the Motor City Kitties, for example, they did something dumb and they should be scrutinized, and it like that big issue. Can't do that. No excuses. Also, what they did does not rise to the level of what that kind of infraction is. It's simply not the same. Let's look at the comments real quick before we move forward, JT. Let's see. Thank you, Logan, for coming in just to say boo Easton. Appreciate you for that. Dr. Lippy here says Jags player got less games for actually using PEDs. What a complete joke. You're going to mention that later, but the Jaguars losing one of their tackles today for 4 games because of PED abuse. It is kind of shocking that, you go back to Taylor Lewan, who the same deal, DeAndre Hopkins, same deal last year. Both of those players, I believe, got 6 games, the equivalent of what NPF did. You can look at those two things and be like, they should not have the same punishment. I mean, I kind of get how the NFL has to throw the book at them for the gambling. You have to make it like, I think the point of the punishment is that it is overkill. It is the ultimate deterrent, right? And I think it should be working. Shrike 113. Look at the bright side. At least the Titans can't re-sign Dennis Daly. Yes, they can't re-sign him, but you know what they could do? They could trade for him again. So don't count your chickens before they hatch. Dr. Lip says hashtag trade for Daly. Please go away. I'm not going to dive super deep into this, but at some point you have to start thinking about moving Tannehill. This is clearly a rebuild situation offensively. I disagree, but the Tannehill portion of this, I think the general point you're making here is something we'll talk about here in a second, because it could ultimately result in, not to be dramatic, altering the trajectory of this franchise moving forward. Like it could end up, I'm not saying it will be, but there's a possibility that is what this ends up becoming. And so that's a big deal. Dr. Lip also very, very active in the comments today. Thank you. The NFLPA is who I think he's blaming here for negotiating a deal so bad that doesn't allow players to bet other sports while near the facility. Agreed. The NFLPA is a joke. Okay. Appreciate everybody in the comments. Thank you for being so active today. Reminder, if you are watching with us live, go over to YouTube, Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. That's where you can interact in the comments. And hey, do me a personal favor real quick. Pause, share this with somebody, retweet, like, send it to a friend. We appreciate you doing everything you can to get as many folks in here as you can so we can talk about this. So JT, you assembled a list of just kind of breaking down, okay, what are the Titans going to be facing from a defensive line standpoint in their first 6 opponents this season? What did you find in terms of the statistics around those 6 teams?
Yeah, so I was that was my first thought, right? After hearing the 6-game suspension come down, I started thinking, okay, well, without NPF there to kind of be really the only anchor point on this line that's going to stay consistent from last year.
That's a good point. This line is going to be 5 for 5, brand new, no same position players as last year, which is bizarre.
I was looking at what were the grades per PFF in 2022. What the teams that they'll play, what were their pass rush grades and what were their run defense grades. So week 1, they'll be playing the New Orleans Saints, who ranked 26th in pass rush, 15th in run defense. Second week, playing the Los Angeles Chargers, who were 21st in pass rush, 30th in pass or run defense. Next week, they'll play Cleveland, who was 8th in pass rush and 29th in run defense. Cincinnati in week 4, 17th in pass rush, 16th in run defense. Indy, week 5, 30th in pass rush and 12th in run defense from 2022. And then finally going to London, the last game NPF will have to sit out is Baltimore, who were 12th in pass rush and 7th in run defense. So I said it's a mixed bag, right? It's not all bad. It's not like they're playing the best of the best from last year. Mm-hmm. But you look at those teams, and there are some serious playmakers for a brand new line, like we just said, to handle.
Right. And Cleveland and Baltimore are going to be an issue.
Those are the big ones. And then I saw Junior Riddle kind of point out the same thing earlier today, that there are a bunch of notable edge rushers that the Titans will now have to face. Cam Jordan, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, Kwity Paye, to just name a few. Like those are
don't forget Odafe Oweh.
Yes, like big deal for a couple of these guys, that a brand new line.
Well, and the real problem is when you name 2 of those guys and they're on the same team, right? Because if you got one star that you got to shut down, and Cam Jordan, for example, in New Orleans. Like you might, with one intended starting tackle, you might be able to handle that and just get in pitch help to one side. But when you've got, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on the same team on the field at the same time, Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson on the field at the same time, Kwity Paye and Odafe Owe on the field at the same time, it's not going to be great. You can't,
not going to be easy for sure.
Cover them both at the same time. You can't pitch help. You can't shift help to get both guys at the same time. You're going to have to take your lumps and cross your fingers and close your eyes and hope on somebody in those games. And so it's a big problem. And so with that, let's talk about what the ripple effect here is and what this may cause for the Titans and for NPF. And then we'll talk about potential replacements for that right tackle position. The first question is this, JT. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's unlikely for sure, but I don't think it's impossible that NPF has inadvertently put his job at risk. Like in the NFL, you're always at risk of losing your position. No matter who you are, you have to defend your starting position. You have to earn your starting position each and every week. Nothing is given. So missing any amount of time for injury or for sickness or for suspension, not great, right? When you miss 6 games and you are a second-year player who really desperately, this team needed you to have a kind of a Chigakonkwo year 2 leap that we're already seeing in him and expecting from him. Like a lot of year 2 players on this team, Chigakonkwo, NPF, Treylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, to name a few. Players like Monty Rice, who's in his 3rd season now, but really his 2nd season of healthiness and playing. These guys are being expected to take a second-year leap that this team needs from them, especially on the offensive side of the ball. That's kind of what they're banking on, right? Like this team thinks they're competitive. And if these players hit and take that leap, like we often see statistically, historically, it happens for a lot of second-year players. It starts to click. You see a big jump, especially at certain positions. But it's not a guarantee, right? And if you don't have that from these guys, then their expectations as an organization to compete become delusional because you didn't you're expecting, to roll the dice and get the right number on each of these guys. But if you roll and just get a bunch of snake eyes, you're in trouble. This team suddenly is looking for answers because they need their young homegrown guys to compete and to improve. And with MPF, he's not going to get that opportunity to improve in the sense that he's not going to be able to show it on the field. Maybe he improves behind the scenes. Maybe he has already improved behind the scenes. But he's going to have somebody else playing that position. And depending on who it is, I don't love any of the options. And so you would think that he's going to be a warm welcome after those 6 weeks. 7, by the way, actually, because the Titans have a week 7 bye. So we won't see him until the 8th week of the season.
The biggest thing I was going to say is that we've been talking this whole offseason that we are kind of expecting NPF to take this second-year leap, that he was going to be something that we're kind of banking on him. He had good play in the beginning of the season last year, and we see how kind of like the likes of Andrew Thomas and a bunch of other linemen in the league, where that second year is a huge year to take a developmental leap. Not to mention, like, NPF will be there at training camp and preseason, but once the regular season starts, he cannot practice with the team, which I think is something that is getting overlooked. So
it's a big deal.
Now you have NPF who will be there for the offseason portion of training camp, but he's not going to be able to practice with the team for 6 weeks. And so throwing him in there after 6 weeks, I don't feel good about his development anymore.
And how can you? I mean, that's what I was getting at is ultimately, while I don't love the people that are potentially going to take that job, if somebody comes in and through 6 weeks, they're just balling out and they're a surprise. It's through 6 weeks, they've allowed 1 sack and 4 pressures. And after that bye, you're like, well, there's some continuity building here. Maybe NPF is the more talented player, but there's a chemistry element there. I'm not saying that it's likely he'll lose his job, but he has he's cracked that door open for himself, and he's begging for somebody to bust in and to take it. And so that's the biggest thing for him. He is jeopardizing not just the team's success, but his own success in the NFL and in his career. The other question in terms of what ripple effect this could cause for me, JT, is that it puts the Titans in a real bind during the part of the season that is both arguably the hardest on their schedule. I'm not sure there's a harder 6-game stretch than this for the Titans. They don't have any real cupcakes in there, but it's also the portion of the year that may very well determine the future of this franchise. We've talked about how, in the Ryan Tannehill versus Will Levis or Malik Willis debate, who should play and when, obviously based on talent, Ryan Tannehill is the guy. There's no doubt. And if this team's going to be competitive this year, that's what they have to do. They have to roll with Ryan Tannehill, and that's what they're planning on doing. But JT, and we've talked about this, if they get through 6 weeks and they have their bye week 7, they're looking down the last 12 games of the year, and they're sitting at 2-4, 1-5. Do they start to question, okay, how long is Ryan Tannehill's leash? If we aren't competing for a playoff spot this year, if we aren't competing for the AFC South title this year, would it not be advantageous to us as a franchise looking medium to long term? Let's get these young guys in there. Let's see what we've got. Let's see if we can get them some reps and develop them with some live bullets, especially looking towards Will Levis. Do we find out what we have in him this year? And if he works, then good. And maybe we're a middling team and we're 8-9 and we missed the playoffs, but we feel like we have our franchise guy going forward. And if he stinks, well, we were already 1-5 or 2-4 with Ryan Tannehill. We'll stink with him, and then we'll be at the top of the draft order next year, and we'll go back to the well, go fishing again for another guy, and potentially get one of the top guys in next year's draft. That's what they have to consider if and when, God forbid, because it makes our job more boring if they stink. We're rooting for them to not be 1-5 or 2-4 through 6 weeks. I preferred them to be surprisingly good so that I can say, haha, to everyone that said that they aren't competitive, but also to make our jobs more entertaining and cause folks to want to tune in and listen. Because here's the thing, like our content, when a team absolutely sucks, y'all don't tune in for good reason. Like, who wants to sit and torture themselves? Like, we want you to be excited to talk about the Titans and come and talk about the Titans with us. And so I do think that him being out, I wouldn't say it's like a 2 or 3 game swing by any means. I think that it won't be that big of a deal. And maybe if the whole point of this first 6 games, which I think is kind of going to be their game plan as a team looking at the whole season, hey, let's just survive. Let's get through 3-3. Maybe we steal 1-4-2. And then, the back 2/3 of our season get a lot more advantageous to us. That's when we kind of turn on the gas. We've got a month and a half of chemistry. We kind of figured out what works, what doesn't. We can rock and roll from there. If they're not able to do that now, because one game against the Ravens or the Browns, for example, they allow 6 sacks, and this team is starting to reel a little bit. And the offensive line is, under this brand new rebuild that they are undergoing, struggling to get a start of any kind of struggling to tread water because NPF is out and that right side is just not shored up. That could change the entire trajectory of this team going forward. And I do wonder if there's going to be a multiplier effect on the interior of the line, in the sense that Daniel Brunskill, we talked about this on a previous show. I wonder how much of a Aaron Brewer-esque factor he is on the interior, not in the sense that he's a similar player to Aaron Brewer, but in the sense that, is he one of those guys that is good enough to be a nice guard piece when the center and the tackle on either side of him are not needing help and he can just focus on his interior assignment? But when he's having to shift help or focus on more than just his responsibility, like Aaron Brewer had to do last year, all year with Dennis Daly, if he's having to look over the shoulder of a rookie or a new guy or a young guy or a frankly bad guy at right tackle and do too much and press, then you may have 2 very bad on paper positions, players at those 2 positions on the right side, at right guard and at right tackle. Like that could be a multiplier detriment to the Titans if you don't have a guy at guard that can hold their own with a below average or even bad tackle beside him.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of use Daniel Brunskill on that side. I mean, it's better than last year now, like at least it's a little better that you have somebody who's a little bit more proven at the right guard position to kind of take that role. But obviously it kind of sucks because you might, I mean, we're about to talk about the case for who actually will fill in, but there's a real possibility that like Daniel Brunskill, who they brought in to be kind of this versatile guy who can play a bunch of different positions, they might have to resort to him playing some right tackle.
Yeah. So let's talk about who could fill this right guard position, or right tackle position rather, for the first 6 weeks. For my money, there are 5 options already on the Titans team, internal, and then a couple of options, but only one real clear option externally. The 5 guys already in the building, already under contract: Jamarco Jones, Jalen Duncan, rookie, Andre Dillard, Daniel Brunskill, John Njoku. And I guess you could include Peter Skoronski in there, but I don't see any reason why they would play him at a position he's never played at a position that also people have and will continue to argue physically he's not cut out for. That seems like a bad way to introduce your first round pick to the NFL and introduce him to the player or to the fan base. With Jamarco Jones, Titans went after him, got him on the roster, I believe before last year, brought him in as a swing tackle, really did not have any impact at all on this team all last season, has not had an impact so far this year, but it's still early. I'm intrigued to see him in the preseason and in training camp later in about less than a month now. But I've really just not seen anything that's like, yeah, he could do that job, because he's been injury riddled, and when he's been on the field in practice, he's just not really been all that good. Jalen Duncan, the 6th round rookie, I believe, 6th round rookie from the Titans, 5th or 6th, I think he was 6th round rookie draft pick of the Titans this past year out of Maryland, is a guy that a number of us have talked about how, hey, he might be a really nice tackle option for you, maybe even your right tackle option in the near future. But he's a raw guy. That's the reason why he fell to the 6th round. Yes, he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school and has had a high level pedigree as an offensive lineman for years and years. But right now, in terms of an NFL polished product, he needs time. He needs at least a year, maybe 2, to sit and to learn and to develop. I just don't, from what I've seen in practice, I don't think that's it. We'll see when he gets pads on, but he's struggled out there in the ways that we expected him to struggle, but struggled nonetheless. Andre Dillard, I would be shocked if they did this. I mean, maybe the thinking is, okay, Andre Dillard, we'll move him to right tackle. We'll bump Peter Skoronski out to left tackle, his natural position that he has experience in college. We'll cross our fingers that Skoronski can, in fact, play tackle. I think that he can. And with Dillard on the right side, we're just going to hold our breath and pray and hope that it translates. The problem here is that the Eagles did briefly try Andre Dillard at that right tackle position for a little bit when he was still up there in Philadelphia, and it went very, very poorly. He has said himself, like Dr. Lip in the comments said, Andre Dillard, that he is exclusively a left tackle. And if you do any digging on him, then that seems to be the case. Daniel Brunskill is another guy who is a potential move there. I think that this one they may play around with in August. And I will say, side note, it's very funny how we've been talking all offseason about how, oh, thank goodness, finally, this Titans team has an offensive line situation where we can go into training camp just knowing where the guys are, knowing who's playing what. They can just develop chemistry and really hone their craft at their specific position. They can focus on one position. We don't have to sit and play musical chairs in the media and with the fan base about who's going to play where, when, and why. Now we have to do that because there's going to be a lot of, I think, trying things out in August during training camp. And one of those things could be maybe Daniel Brunskill, who's the assumed right guard right now. Maybe you bump him out to right tackle. When they signed him, Rand Carthen and Mike Vrabel making a big point about how they were excited to sign a guy who has the experience and in their analysis ability to play all 5 positions on the offensive line, be that ultimate versatile swing tool guy that they can use in any way that they see fit. Well, that would fit in with the idea that you could move him out to right tackle in a pinch, but is that going to be any good? He has played 310 career snaps in the NFL at right tackle, as our buddy, friend of the show, Sam Phelan, pointed out on Twitter earlier today. So that's something to monitor. You could see them do that, and then maybe a guy like Corey Levin comes in and fills in at that right guard position. Maybe you have a guy like Jalen Duncan, who is younger but has some talent. Maybe you don't have faith in him at right tackle, but at right guard, you feel like he could be serviceable. Maybe Jamarco Jones comes in and fills in that right guard position for a while. That is something that I would be kind of surprised that they didn't play around with it a little bit during training camp at the end of this month. or the end of next month rather. So I think that that's something that could happen. And then as Dr. Lip in the comments mentions, the fifth guy who I think is maybe a dark horse to at least be given a chance at the position is John Njoku, the undrafted free agent rookie out of Boise State. I remember in the pre-draft process, we would mention him whenever we talked about offensive linemen that we liked. We thought that he was going to be a potential sneaky good addition for a team later in the draft. He ultimately goes undrafted, but the Titans giving him a $3 million contract for a UDFA, larger than you expect to see for most. I'm assuming he'd had a number of suitors in that free agency period. And they land him because they like him a lot. They think that he could be a developmental left tackle. From a measurement standpoint, the thing that always stood out to us when we talked about him as a draft show, scouting him, he looks the part. Like the length, the size, the height, the speed, the power, it's all there. He's just very, very raw. And so if he can get that rawness buffed out, polished quickly, much more quickly than any of us expect, maybe he's your best option. And I think that he's somebody that they'll also be giving a chance. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him play a lot of right tackle in the preseason, for example, just for them to see what's going on, see what they can get out of a guy like him in a pinch like this. Then we move on to the free agent and trade market, JT. The trade market I only mentioned because it's technically an option, but I would be floored. Like, this is the least likely scenario in my mind for them to go trade for somebody, simply because, as we've covered ad nauseum for a long time now, they don't have anything to give. They are not super rich in capital going forward, and so I don't see a trade coming down the pike, even for like a future 6th round pick. They don't have many of those. They do have some options in free agency, the best of which is George Fant, who is a right tackle, has been his whole career. He's the youngest of the free agent options available at 30 years old from the New York Jets. Some other options, Jawan James, who's 31 from Baltimore, Marcus Cannon, who's 35 from New England, Ty Nsekhe, who's 37 from the Rams, and Mike Remmers, who's 34, also previously with the Jets. George Fant is the clear best option here. We had a number of folks in the media. I know our buddy and friend of the show, Mike Herndon, was talking about this before this news ever came out about Nicholas Petit-Frere, that going and getting a guy like George Fant to be some tackle depth, to be some security at a position that the Titans are now finding out the hard way, and many fans are finding out the hard way. You really don't have any good options behind them on the team in terms of depth. Like, your backup plan doesn't really exist, and or it's a really sketchy, really scary backup plan. George Fant would have been a nice addition then. He almost feels like a necessity now, a necessary, necessary addition now. I was going to pull up his stats, his PFF performance here. He played 516 snaps last year, allowed 7 penalties and 5 sacks. Pretty average numbers, but certainly serviceable. He's been in the league for a while now, obviously 30 years old. But he would be 6'5", 322. He's former Western Kentucky product, drafted by the Seahawks, now spent some time with the Jets, and is kind of just a journeyman swing tackle that I think you could bring in for a reasonable price to fill that role for 6 weeks. But JT, that brings me to this. Well, actually, let me bring up that point in a minute. First, I want to ask you, of those 6 options, right? Going and getting a free agent in George Fant, John Njoku, Daniel Brunskill, Andre Dillard, Jalen Duncan, Jamarco Jones. What are your thoughts on those? What is your snap judgment from the outside looking in, what you would do and why? Or maybe one that you're like, there's no shot they do this. I think this is a horrible idea.
I think the 2 options that they really have, the 2 smartest options, I think, in my opinion, are either go out and sign a guy like George Fant, or put your faith in one of the guys like Jalen Duncan or John Njoku. Mostly
so go
because,
young or go get somebody.
I think so. And
okay.
I just think there's something to be said about keeping Brunskill at the right guard position so that when NPF does come back, there's at least a little bit of familiarity and kind of just similarity on that line already. There is some chemistry between the other 4 guys on that line. And putting a guy like Jalen Duncan or John Njoku in there, and just seeing what you have in him is probably my 2 options that I'd go with. Of course, you also have Jamarco Jones there. didn't really show too much last year. I honestly
show
think
anything. He was non-existent.
I think that one of the two rookies might at least bring a little bit more to that right tackle position than Jamarco Jones. I just think it's probably not a great idea you already lose one guy at the right tackle. I wouldn't go changing up the rest of the line right now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that you need to focus on the most minimally invasive option, right? Like you need to go with what is going to screw up the rest of your existing plan the least. And while on paper, I do kind of lean Daniel Brunskill as the best internal option, simply because he has experience there. He's a veteran. He
has experience, but he hasn't played that position since 2019,
which is fair. Like again, the letterhead above all of this is none of these internal options are good options.
Yes.
They are all bad options. So he is the best of the crappy options in my mind in a vacuum, but then you consider what it's going to do to shuffle up the rest of the lineup. And I don't really love that. I'm kind of with you. Maybe see what you've got in one of those two young guys to see if they can spot start and just go on a heater to start the season. Kind of, again, just crossing your fingers, holding your breath. But then George Fant feels like the best option to me for obvious reasons. But that brings me to this, JT. And the last thing we'll talk about on this subject before we move on to the rest of the things we have to mention in today's show. You know, the Titans are in the sweepstakes for a player named DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if anybody's noticed this or not. They don't have a ton of room. They have a lot of room that hypothetically could be made very easily via simple restructure. But the cap space, that is, when I refer to room. Does this put them in a bind in the sense that they have to now consider, you know, we can't have both. You either get George Fant in a necessity role, or you get DeAndre Hopkins in what I think they view as a more of a luxury move. Certainly there's some necessary additions on that wide receiver core eventually, but I do, as I've said many times, I do think that this team internally is comfortable going into the season with the guys they currently have in terms of offensive weapons. Should that be the case, they're not going to put all their chips in the middle of the table and go all in on a guy in DeAndre Hopkins because they think that they're a receiver away. I think they would just like to have him around because he obviously would make an impact on this team and improve that receiving core dramatically. If you had to choose between the two, and they may have to, they may not, what would you do and why?
I mean, it makes more sense to go out and get the offensive weapon, probably.
That's what I would
think.
Do. Yep.
Just because, like you said, there are already just a bunch of options in-house. Like, from a business standpoint, I think the smart move is to continue to pursue DeAndre Hopkins, who, by the way, like, if you read the tea leaves, other teams are already starting to maybe try to make room for him. And then we have not seen a Titans restructure or anything like that to make that move. So, I mean, they might be thinking internally that the race may be coming to the finish line and they're not the lead horse, and they might be already be turning their attention to George Fant and to filling that hole. But then again, like, to sign a guy who really, like George Fant, who only is going to be there for 6 games, instead of going after DeAndre Hopkins, who potentially could have an impact the entire season, I would lean still pursuing Hopkins.
Yeah, I'm with you on Hopkins. One, because I'll take like the Jamar Chase versus Penei Sewell debate back when the Bengals were debating which to draft at the top of the draft in 2020 or 21, whatever it was. You know, do you take the weapon or do you take the protection? I'm gonna lean the weapon in today's NFL. That's just the nature of the NFL, right? But also with Hopkins, if you go and get him, he is somebody that is not only going to contribute for the entire year, be an element of this team positively, you know, God willing, the entire season, but also potentially seasons going forward. With George Fant or anybody they bring in to spot start as the right tackle, the idea is that it's really only a Band-Aid for 1/3 of the season, and then their impact is depth swing tackle, which is important, don't get me wrong, but they have guys that they're trying to already on the roster turn into that swing tackle. Like, they don't have no plans for that position. And so I'm with you. I think I would lean DeAndre Hopkins, but this ultimately may be the thing that keeps them from getting Hopkins. They may feel like they have to go get some help at right tackle, and they no longer have the money to go and get a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, or at least put up a super competitive offer for him, because they're cash strapped and don't want to mortgage the future any further to make some space. All right, let's move on to some Titans news, the Titans news portion of today. JT, if you would not mind walking us through some of the news around the league.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with fellow AFC South counterparts today. It's just not a great day for the AFC South.
A lot of negative news, yeah.
Not to get suspended challenge, impossible for the AFC South today.
Yeah.
But along with the NPF news today, Adam Schefter did report that Isaiah Rodgers and Rashad Berry of the Indianapolis Colts and free agent Demetrius Taylor are being suspended indefinitely through at least the 2023 season for betting on NFL games. Last season, two things with this. One, as we kind of touched on, it seems like at least Isaiah Rodgers was doing a little bit of insider trading last season. Which is, and that's kind of the difference. It seems like NPF didn't know.
Something that bad guys do, boys and girls.
He gets the slap on the wrist, and Isaiah Rodgers is getting the full Calvin Ridley treatment.
Or more. I mean, he's getting the at least one season. We'll see. I'll say this. They released him. The Colts cut both guys. Now with the other guy who I forget, Rashad Berry, practice squad guy, like, right? Isn't he? I thought.
I believe so.
Excuse me. No. It's the free agent. Well, no, I think Berry is a practice squad guy and the free agent as well. Like, I understand both. Not being on an active roster, cutting them, like, cut your bait, whatever. It's not a big deal. They cut Isaiah Rodgers, the Colts did, over this. And unless they know internally that he's probably getting more than a year, that is really stupid. Like, somebody's going to Calvin Ridley that thing. He's a guy that played 9 games for them last year. Ask any Colts fan or media member, they would tell you that he was poised this year to make his kind of like Christian Fulton leap, in the sense that he maybe not be the best corner in the league, but as long as he's on the field, he was going to make himself a nice payday and be a bona fide cornerback 1 for a team and solidify his future with the Colts or whoever was going to pay him that money. He forfeits all of that now. He cost himself tens of millions of dollars, one would think, with this move. And if he's only out one season, why wouldn't somebody like the Jaguars with Calvin Ridley last season before the trade deadline, why wouldn't somebody go out and get him? Calvin Ridley was still on the Falcons despite the suspension. The Jaguars had to trade for him, which was still a good move in the long term. With Rodgers, somebody just has to go sign him. Why wouldn't you do that if you had an extra roster spot that you just wanted to stash him away? Unless you know, again, that he's going to be out for more than a year, and maybe the Colts know that. Maybe that's why, if they do, or they know it's likely, then I totally get it. Otherwise, doesn't that seem like a really short-sighted decision? I
think so, especially when you consider what the Colts secondary situation kind of looks like right now. Right. I was just, because obviously Isaiah Rodgers won't be able to play. I believe they had another guy in their secondary who was out for the season with an injury. So I was intrigued to see what the Colts secondary would look like.
So who's going to play?
And lo and behold, outside of like Kenny Moore, the Colts, it's looking like they might have to start both of their rookie cornerbacks this year in Julius Brents, who I learned today apparently is going by Juju. So Juju Brents.
Okay.
And Darius Rush out of South Carolina.
I will say, for guys like you and me, very exciting, because I'm glad we get to see both these guys play. We scouted these two. These were two of our favorite guys, both top 10, I think, on our cornerback list going into the draft. It's going to be cool to get to see them play. For Colts fans, not cool, because while they were good prospects that we liked, that was also parsed within the context sandwich of you probably don't want to see them right away or be too reliant on them because they are rookie cornerbacks. It's a tough position. It's a premium position. To have those two guys as starting corners on your team means that the cupboard is pretty bare. And when you let Stephon Gilmore go to the Cowboys, you have Isaiah Rodgers, who was supposed to be your one this season, no longer on the team because he got suspended for at least a year. Things look bleak very, very quickly for them. And just for any Titans fans really distraught over the NPF news, just know no matter in life how bad you have it, somebody else has it worse.
Yeah, and then another thing in the AFC South today that came out pretty recently, the NFL bringing the banhammer down on a lot of people today, but for different reasons this time. Really, the NFL is officially
this guy actually deserved it, for the record.
Yeah,
like there's no
fair enough. Adam Schefter pointed out today that the NFL is officially suspending Jaguars offensive tackle Cam Robinson for 4 games for violating the PED policy per source.
Yeah, tough. I think we already knew that he had violated the policy and that he was going to likely be punished. I don't think we knew for sure what the punishment was going to be until today. And so that's official now. The first month, the Jaguars will be without one of their starting tackles, and that's not good news. It's just bad news for tackles in the AFC South in general. You're right. You got Taylor Lewan getting cut. I believe the Colts cut one of their starting tackles from last season. You've got now 2 tackles suspended. Just putting out some prayers for those other guys. Just be careful, be on your T's and P's, be on the best behavior, and try not to get hurt or in trouble or cut because the AFC South is a bad place to be if you're a tackle right now.
Yeah, and then Field Yates came out and had a little bit more information on this. The suspension is going to cost Cam Robinson $3.55 million in base salary and voids the guaranteed money left in his contract. It's a costly suspension,
Voids
but
all the upcoming guaranteed money.
If we want to talk about guys who we looked at and evaluated in the draft, it seems like this is going to open the door for Anton Harrison to be a starter for them day one.
As a draft nerd, excited about that too. I mean, remember we did our 20 questions for 20 AFC South rookies earlier this season after the draft. And I was looking back on that list the other day, like, we may see 10 of these guys actually have an impact on the field this year. So it may not be that exciting to come back and revisit this. Maybe not, my friend. That list keeps growing of people on that. We may see 15 of those 20 guys have a big impact in some form or fashion on the field this year because the AFC South is kind of going through it right now.
Moving on here, as A Vining says in the chat here, do you think that the Titans have any chance of getting DeAndre Hopkins now? Well, the race seems to be heating up at least a little bit as some other suitors possibly make some moves to make some cap space for DeAndre Hopkins. So there are 2 new deals now for the New England Patriots, who have signed some guys to long-term deals. They signed
extended them
or Devontae Parker to
in terms of the impact,
a new $33 million deal. If it lowers that $6.2 million cap hit for Parker, then it definitely will give them more room to increase an offer for Hopkins. And it also, if with these 2 moves, it probably sets a high bar for a Hopkins 1-year deal in terms of APY if the Patriots are still wanting to sign him.
Yeah, so that's the news that came out yesterday. And when I say yesterday, we're recording this on Thursday, obviously. So on Wednesday, it came out that the Patriots be giving that 3-year, $33 million deal to Devontae Parker, who, like you mentioned, feels like he's about 38 years old, 47. I don't know.
He's
only 30.
I know, which is kind of funny that the Patriots are extending a 30-year-old wide receiver long term to possibly make room for another
at 11 million APY. We don't know how much money we'll actually see. We got to see how much he'll actually see because of the details. He may not be seeing much of it, but at 11 million APY on the surface for a guy that, and here's some stats from Warren Sharp, by the way, yesterday, some wild Devontae Parker stats. His wide receiver separation ranking using next gen stats, player tracking data, the last 3 seasons. In 2020, he was 132nd out of 132 tracked receivers. That's bad, by the way, in case you needed to know that. In 2021, 127th out of 127 wide receivers. And in 2022, 122nd out of 122 wide receivers. So, in other words, the last 3 seasons out of the 130-ish receivers that Next Gen Stats has tracked in their separation data, he is dead last in the ability to separate. He is what you folks think NWI actually is. And I'm not saying NWI is good at separating, but holy cow, he's not this. This is a disaster of a separation receiver. And while he's more than anything an injury risk, I don't love the idea of signing him to this simply because he has a hard time staying on the field all that often, and he is 30 years old. The biggest thing for me is the money, right? This is, like you said, people saw this and their immediate thought was, haha, the Patriots are picking Devontae Parker for some reason over DeAndre Hopkins. Clearly they're shoring up their wide receiver core and there's no room for Hopkins anymore. Not really. Actually, it's probably the opposite because, again, this and part of this not friend of the show, but we'd like him to be friend of the show, and person that we bumped into in Indianapolis, Ian Rappaport, big what was it? Big Miller Lite guy. I forget.
I think he's Mick Ultra.
Mick Ultra. Yeah, that sounds right. No, I think he has a big.
We'll have to visit him again next time. Yeah.
Yeah. I do have to say his tweet on the Devontae Parker deal yesterday was kind of misleading because he ended it with Parker finds a home in New England. Made a lot of people think like that they were adding Parker. He was not already on the roster. He was already on the roster. This was an extension of a deal in terms of how it's actually impacting the books. And so they are actually just getting his, like you mentioned, $6.4 million cap hit decreased. It's going to, we're assuming, drop. We don't know yet. You've seen people say that it's going to come down $4 million. Anybody saying that is guessing at this point because the number is not out there yet, but it probably is going to decrease and give them more cap space, of which I think they already had about $14 or $15 million of cap room. They're now going to have even more to offer a deal to DeAndre Hopkins. My question is this, and where I think they actually may have shot themselves in the foot. Like you mentioned, if you're paying Devontae Parker $11 million average per year, how much money do you think DeAndre Hopkins is going to be wanting if and when he signs with the New England Patriots? If that guy who can't separate at the age of 30 and is largely an injury risk and not really a huge impact on the field is getting $11 million, that's pretty big for a guy like that. Hopkins is probably going to strut in there and say, okay, the floor is the OBJ deal. That's the floor. Like we want 15, 16, $17 million a year, especially if it's going to be a 1 or 2 year deal. And I don't know if they're going to be willing to pay that. Like, I'm not sure how the Patriots, and by the Patriots, I mean Bill Belichick, who has a fantastic, and this is extreme sarcasm, history of evaluating receiving talent. Shout out when he went and got Mohamed Sanu, who traded like a second round pick for him, and then he didn't do jack. He's had a laundry list of folks in the past couple of years that he's added that are kind of a nightmare. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Just I'm seeing in this thread, on this tweet thread about how bad Devontae Parker is sometimes. I'm just seeing more and more stats about how he stinks at separating. Anyways, it's like
I thought like DeAndre Hopkins just signed or something like that. That's what your
I'm so sorry.
I was like, what is happening?
No, it was just like all these like first percentile, second percentile, 0th percentile. Well, it was not even a thing. Like just tough scene. But anyways, yes, I do think that may be the thing where they shot themselves in the foot. And another point that was brought up by our guy, Zach Lyons, over at Football and Other F Words, is that this may be indicative of them reaching an impasse with Hopkins. I'm not saying that it's likely that's what it indicates. I'm not saying that it even is probable that that's what this indicates. But you could, from a business standpoint, be like, okay, maybe they decided they weren't set on bringing Devontae Parker back or extending him, but maybe they are now realizing that Hopkins is not in the picture. He's going to pass on them, or they're going to pass on him. And they're deciding as an organization, okay, we'll rock and roll with Devontae Parker going forward. So that's something to consider. Again, I don't think that's likely. I think it's more likely that they're creating space for Hopkins. You've also heard in the past couple of days, not sure how reliable these reports are, but you've heard that the Browns are kind of poking around. You've heard that the Panthers looking to maybe get a true one in there for their rookie first overall pick, Bryce Young, kind of poking around. They're still in the race. I think it may be a 4-horse race now between the Browns, Panthers, Titans, and Patriots. And right now I'd say the Patriots are probably head and shoulders above the competition. It is hard to say though, because the Titans love to just be quiet about these things and then all of a sudden kind of just drop it on your head. And you're like, oh, they were actually interested. They were just working behind the scenes. So we won't know for sure what's going on there, but based on public records, public reporting, not great indications for whether the Titans may or not get D-Hop. I do think, to A. Vining's question, do I think they have a chance? Yeah, I really do think that they do, but maybe it's a 25% chance, 20% chance they land him, 75 to 80% chance they don't. That's kind of where I'm at right now, JT. What about you?
I think so. And like, it's really interesting that we've kind of gone full circle in this, because I remember when he first hit the market, I think I asked you like, what is the chance that it was that
he's like, maybe, like probably not
15, 20%. And then we kind of got up all the way to like 45% or so. And now we're all the Titans
pulled out all the stops. It seemed like there was nobody else getting into the race. Like everything was trending the right direction. And then now it's kind of trending the other way. Right. But maybe that's like my point here really is that maybe that's a result of them kind of cooling down on that situation, or maybe it's a result of, again, the Titans are an organization that keep to themselves, and maybe it's just the fact of the matter that it's June, it's July, they're not talking to people publicly, they're on vacation, they're talking to D-Hop behind the scenes, they're working the phones, full J-Rob style, making deals to bring in big acquisitions from their boathouse, from their speedboat on Radnor Lake. Like maybe that's what's going on and they're just not telling folks. I don't know, but I do think that their odds today are less than they were a week or two ago. Any other news for us today?
Yeah, we have one little tidbit to look forward to. We're almost out of the content drought here as training camp has some start dates. So the rookies will report on July 22nd, and then veterans join the rookies on July 25th. And then from there, we'll be full steam ahead. We'll be having coverage almost daily, probably from here and around the Nashville area. So super excited for that.
Super excited. Yeah, we've only got, like 3.5 weeks now before they report, before the media. We got our training camp scheduled the other day. They told us we can't actually publicize it. So I can't tell y'all when. Like it's what you'd expect, like most days in August. Like it's not really like some surprising thing. They just let us know when and where we can be there. And like when Vrabel press conferences are going to happen, blah, blah, blah. They announced that they would be, for those that may be interested in going to training camp as a fan, they said in that email that we could tell folks that they will be, as a team, announcing the days that are open to fans at training camp the week of July 10th. So the week of July 10th, that's not when you'll go, but that's when they may become available. And you need to, if you're looking to go, I know St. Thomas Sports Park, very nice. The one thing is it is landlocked by the river on one side and the lake on the other. They don't have much room for like fan accommodations or bleachers or anything out there for folks to come and watch. And so last year was the first year they brought fans in. It was a limited number each day. There's not parking either. Like when it's just the team and media there, we're having to park like up against the sidewalk, and they're having to show us where to park every day because there's not a ton of room. And so when the fans come in, they have to park them. They do a good job. They park them on a lot like 5 minutes away, and the Titans shuttle you to and from your car. So it's not a big deal. But it is limited. So if you want to get a ticket, it's very difficult. They sell out quickly. I know a lot of them, if not most of them, are available to season ticket holders first. So if you're a season ticket holder, you'll probably have a pretty decent chance of getting in. If not, you're going to need to be really vigilant about it if you want to go and see that. But for our part in the media, I think there's going to be 17-ish opportunities for us to get out there and get some firsthand information. And so that's super exciting. Cannot wait. And with that, that's JT with the news. We are done today. Thank you to everybody for tuning in live. Appreciate you. If you are listening via podcast or via the YouTube video on Friday, thank you. Subscribe, leave a rating and a review, 5 stars, and any rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify that you leave, we would love to read on the show. You can shout yourself out. Leave your Twitter handle. We'll follow you. We'll tell everybody on here to follow you. Say how much you hate the show. Say the things that you want us to shut up about. Whatever, criticism is a gift. Feedback is a gift. So we will take any and all as long as it is 5 stars. And then, hey, reminder, we as a show, the Hot Read Podcast, have partnered with Zen Sportsbook. So you use code HOTPOD, HOTPOD, when you sign up over at Zen Sports, which is the newest and best sportsbook legal just here in the state of Tennessee. It's just Tennesseans that have availability to this. So if you're in the Tennessee area, as many of you are, sign up for Zen Sports. You get 5% unlimited cash back welcome bonus when you sign up at Zen Sports using our code HOTPOD, HOTPOD, when you sign up, and you earn 3% cash back rewards on all of your betting volume every month after that. JT, that's not 3% back or 5% back on your wins. That is 5% and then 3% forever back on all of your bets placed on your betting volume. So you can bet to your heart's content. No matter your outcome, you're going to get cash back just for betting with Zen Sports. Awesome deal. Make sure to go over there, sign up, and use code HOTPOD as we get closer and closer to the best bet gauntlet, ramping back up for year technically 3. Cannot wait. Going to have some special guests on this year, I hope. Alan Bell, our guy. We have him on a couple of times. Some other guys that we've made friends with over the past year. Can't wait for the betting to get kicked back up into gear. And as long as you're not an NFL player, I highly recommend getting on these sports books. And with that, we'll be back on Monday morning talking about who knows what, whatever the news of the day is, or maybe we can finally get around to the show idea that we had to kick for today. And whatever it may be, we'll be back first thing Monday morning. Make sure to join us then, wherever you get the show. Until then, I'm your host, Easton Freeze, for producer JT. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.